Move on now. We're heading to Poland, where NATO allies have gathered for urgent talks. The emergency meeting was triggered after more than a dozen Russian drones targeting Ukraine crossed into Polish airspace overnight, forcing NATO to scramble fighter jets to shoot them down. In response, Prime Minister Donald Tusk is warning the situation is dangerously close to, quote, open conflict, but Moscow is pushing back, accusing Warsaw of spreading myths. The Kremlin says there's no evidence the drones were shot down on Polish territory. Well, let's cross live to the Ukrainian capital. France 24's Gulliver Cragg is standing by for us. Gulliver, these drones were reportedly meant to be targeting Ukraine. How's Ukraine reacting to this incident?
I think, first of all, it's very important to underline that there is ample evidence that the drones came down on Polish territory. Some of them shot down, some of them apparently just crashed, but there are photos and eyewitness accounts all over the place. And also the intelligence services of Poland, other NATO allies and Ukraine and the air forces of those countries trace where the drones are flying from, know what kinds of drones they are, and it's absolutely clear that those were Russian drones and that they came down on Polish territory. In Ukraine, there is a huge amount of discussion about it, as you would expect, in the media and on social media, most of it turning on the question of, is this good news or bad news for Ukraine? In the sense that it would be good news in the eyes of the Ukrainians if it makes more Europeans realize that Russia is a threat to them as well, and that therefore the best way of countering that threat is to help Ukraine more, and that perhaps now Poland might be persuaded to start shooting down these drones and rockets over western Ukraine, which would free up more of the Ukrainian air defenses to concentrate on other parts of the country. That's something the Ukrainians have been asking for some time. The other side of the coin, if you like, is that the Polish air defences clearly didn't perform all that well. If they say that there were 19, Zelensky says it might have been actually 24. The Polish official version is 19 drones over its territory, and only 3 or 4 were shot down. Others flew a long way into Polish territory because debris of drones that apparently crashed were found quite near Warsaw and even further west than Warsaw in the Łódź region. And that makes Ukrainians think that the Poles are going to be saying now that they need to keep more air defences for themselves and not be sending more over to help Ukraine. Some Ukrainian voices are quite hysterically calling this an attack on a NATO member state and saying that especially more experienced pundits are being more cautious and saying Poland itself is calling this an act of aggression, has asked NATO for consultations. It does appear that most of the drones were reconnaissance drones or decoys, and that it was more about provocation, perhaps some reconnaissance, surveillance, and seeing what Poland's reaction would be and what NATO's reaction would be, rather than any intention of actually causing damage in Poland itself.
And of course, Gulliver, most of the fighting and drone strikes normally take place on Ukrainian territory, and last night wasn't an exception to that.
No, we're talking all day today about between 19 and 24 drones flying over Poland. There were more than 400 in Ukrainian airspace overnight. One civilian is reported to have been killed. That's in Zhytomyr region. So compared to other nights, it wasn't as deadly, but it's still a very large number of drones. Certainly a factory that was described as a civilian factory in Vinnytsia was hit. Another one in Khmelnytsky region, which President Zelensky said was a sewing workshop. Of course, we don't know for sure what these workshops were actually making. We can only presume that there were quite a lot of other military and secret targets that were hit, but there isn't much reported damage to civilian infrastructure. Meanwhile, fighting on the front line continues, with the Russians trying, I think, for one last push before the weather changes in the autumn. But the fact is that they have not reached their goals of entering the various eastern Ukrainian cities that they want to take control of, or even the outskirts of those cities, before the bad weather sets in. So if they want to carry on their offensive into the autumn and winter, they're going to be doing so in open countryside, which is not such a good situation to be in when the weather starts getting colder and the roads and fields become extremely muddy.
Gulliver, thank you so much for bringing us up to speed. Gulliver Cragg reporting live there from the Ukrainian capital.